All right, good morning. Now you can hear me, thank you. Um, Here we are live in the Best Western, just east of Harrisburg, for those of you who are scattered around the state listening in. I know there's throngs of people who are online joining us in the beautiful room, the Harris Room, is it, that we're in Harrisburg? Heritage Room, beaming live. Good morning, my name is Ken Thompson. I'm the Chief Medical Officer for the Pennsylvania Psychiatric Leadership Council, and I'm extremely happy to be joined here by people from across the state of Pennsylvania, both live in person, and I hope we'll get some folks on screen over time. We have a really jam-packed day of I think, real opportunities to learn and to interact and to imagine a future for work that we'll be doing. And I want to start off by just doing a couple of keeping things in order in the house here. So folks know there is a bathroom outside to the outside the Heritage Room here, I guess over in the corridor over there. You have to check out by 11 a.m. So take care of that if you need to. And I'm told that the microphone can pick up chatter. So if you're talking to somebody else who's right next to you, just try to keep it down as low as possible while the microphones are operating. We are broadcasting, and I'm really happy that we have this opportunity to get to people who may not have the time or the capacity to get to Harrisburg. But I'm also extremely thrilled by the fact that a number of you have come from across the state, and it's really a thrill to be here. To be here with you. The theme that we're going to be talking about today builds around the concept of community. This is our spring conference. For those of you who haven't been to one of these before, we have usually an event in the spring and then one in the fall. And we want today to really kind of focus in on, at least in part, on this idea of community. We talk about community mental health, we talk about community psychiatry, but we almost actually never talk about what community means. It's sort of the place we do the work or the place we are hoping people can live, but we actually don't put a whole lot of emphasis on thinking about what community means in and of itself. And I think I'm hopeful, actually, that after all the things that we have had to endure over the last decade, that one of the things that we finally maybe do is come to grips with what the idea of community actually means. I'm a psychiatrist. I have been a community psychiatrist my entire career. And in that context, if you think about the work that I've done, probably 80, maybe 90% of it has been in an office with a person, talking about the challenges that they're having in their lives, with essentially no immediate connection to community. It is, in fact, relatively rare for psychiatrists to have a lot of interaction with community and to think about the idea that the people that we are trying to be helpful to are, in fact, embedded in community, and if they're not embedded in community, that is one of the key challenges that they are facing in their lives. In fact, it may be one of the most important aspects of their healing. It may be one of the most important things that helps them not succumb to other illnesses or challenges. So the idea of community has really been, in many ways, sort of vacant from, I mean, I thought I was in community. I don't want you to think I didn't think I was a community psychiatrist. I was there. I was going to the office in the community all the time, but I really didn't think hard about community. Some of you know that over the last number of years, I have been working to bring a method of large group work that is conducted in community, something called integrative community therapy, that, just to mention it for a second, is maybe an example of what community actually means. Invented in a favela is a shanty town outside the cities of Brazil. There are large, sometimes several million people living in what are called informal communities, i.e. they have no title to the land, there's no planning, nobody has laid out an electric or sewage grid, they're just on the land. And they are places where the police and in the old days, the army during the dictatorship would come in and just take a bulldozer and knock everything down, and the people would be displaced again. As you can imagine, these were places that there was a tremendous amount of human suffering and real challenges, and obviously people didn't have any money, right? So the reason I'm mentioning this is because a psychiatrist by the name of Adalberto Barreto was notified about what was happening in these favelas by his brother, who was a human rights lawyer and was working with folks in the favela to try to get the army to stop coming in and knocking down all the buildings. What I mean by that is cardboard shacks, right? The brother, the human rights lawyer, said, you know, there's a tremendous amount of human suffering going on in these places. Could you help out? You're a psychiatrist. You've been trained to help people who are dealing with substance use or the victims of violence or all the kinds of things that you and I all know people suffer from. And Adalberto said, sure. He said, you can just tell them to come to my clinic, you know, across town. Very helpful, wanted to do something good. And then he waited. And he waited. And he waited. And nobody got on the bus to go across town. Nobody had the money to get on the bus to go across town. Nobody had the time to go across. So the help he was offering was really of no help at all. Then finally the brother said to him, you know, Adalberto, you know, nobody's coming, right? And he said, yeah, nobody's coming. He said, well, maybe you should come here. And Adalberto said, okay. And he brought a couple of medical students for a Saturday morning. And he gets to the favela. And remember, a favela, as I said, is just cardboard. There's no buildings. And also, there's no shade. And the reason there's no shade is because any tree that's there is cut down for firewood. So this is Brazil. It's actually just a little bit south of the equator. The sun is hot all the time. So they're standing there. There's a line waiting to see him. As Adalberto tells us, maybe apocryphal, maybe that's appropriate for the speaker we're about to have. 100 people waiting in line to see him. And he goes to the first person in line, who's a woman, and he says, how can I help you? What could I do that would be helpful for you? And she says, I can't sleep. And he says, well, I could give you some medicines to help you sleep. And she says, don't bother. I can't afford to feed my children, so I can't afford any medicine you can give me. And Adalberto now thinks to himself, and he looks out and he sees the 100 people behind her, and he says to himself, I'm in a real pickle. I can't even help the first person. How am I going to get through this day with these 100 people? And as he's having that thought, the person behind the woman starts rubbing her back. and another person goes off and gets her a chair, and another person actually goes and gets a basin of water and washes her feet. And the woman noticeably calms down. And Adalberto realizes, and this is the key point, that every community has its problems and every community has its solutions. It turned out that this woman, the problem that was the most immediate, in fact, was that her husband had been murdered in front of her just 3 weeks beforehand. What Adalberto did in that moment, and with the favela and the people of the favela, is that he figured out that it was possible to get people into a room, large room, or actually just out in the open, and have them share their challenges and share their solutions in a way that bonds people together and makes connections and offers ways of thinking and being together that actually make a difference for people. The Brazilians call this solidarity care. Solidarity care, as opposed to clinical care. And the idea is that human beings are not who we have been thinking they are. Human beings are not, as I said last night, they're not little individuals who are by themselves in the world, kind of careening around through some kind of a pinball machine, bouncing off of other things or people and having no real connection. People are actually all part of a giant web. The way to think about this is that, at least in my mind, is to think about this, is to be able to imagine, you all know that light is both a particle and a wave. We are each particles and we are waves. We are ourselves and we are part of something much larger than ourselves, all at the same time. And we have neglected the part of ourselves that is part of everybody else. When I came to Pittsburgh, I was told at the medical center that I worked at that there was no mission without profit. I was told that anything that we engaged in with any other institution or organization had to have something in it for us. That was actually the first thing that we were told to think. What's in it for us? We now live in a country where that is the predominant mode of the leadership's thinking. What's in it for us, or for me in particular? And I think what we've got to start to think about is every time any one of us gains something better in life, that's a victory for all of us, as long as we share. As long as we share. And as long as we work together to move everybody forward, we are actually being full human beings. And that can only happen in community. That can only happen in our connections with each other. So I am very pleased to be part of the PPLC community. This is a group of people who've been meeting now. We've been meeting for over 20 years. I am thrilled that we have people who are joining us. I am thrilled that we are continuing and that we have a very active day ahead of us to think about the things that we can do together, not necessarily for each of ourselves, but for all of us and for the people of the state of Pennsylvania. So, with that, I don't know if anybody wants to make a comment or has any questions about it, or has a thought about it. And I'd be keen to take that at that moment because I'm a little ahead of schedule. Yes, Rosemary.
I'd be happy to help you draft a supplemental service description to get that as approved care.
Okay, let's talk about that. Yeah, maybe that's a part about community that I think that's really, really important, is that when you put something out into community, it's kind of what Alberto was saying. When you put something out into community, what can come back is that with all the riches of the capacity of the community that you've just been involved in. So, thanks. Rosemary, we'll talk. Any other comments or thoughts that anybody would like to share as we start this morning today?
It sounds rather spiritual, right? That the solution is to be found there. It's already there.
Well, you know, he said, Mark said, it sounds like a spiritual approach. And that's probably, it's probably not an accident that we're about to hear from our next speaker in that context. But I do think that, how to say this, the connections between human beings can be made to look like they don't exist. But the truth is that they are very much there. And because they are in some ways invisible, I think we can use a word like spiritual to understand that. But I don't think it doesn't necessarily require a religious faith necessarily, or even a spiritual faith. I think it requires recognizing that we do not exist alone. There is no human being who is an island, right? It cannot exist and never will. Yeah, Eileen.
I am envisioning a tapestry. And in this tapestry, sometimes we are only seeing the back of the tapestry, which is really ugly. We can't make sense of it. And this is getting into a spiritual element. But God has designed this tapestry that we oftentimes don't see. But it exists. It exists. We're all part of it.
Yeah, we are all woven together. And there may be parts, well, we know there are parts that are not beautiful. And that there's a tremendous amount of suffering that's occurring. But it is up to us as a community to find a way to heal and to take care of each other in a way that is meaningful. And I think that that's a process that the mental health world has to rediscover. We have folks here who doing everything I've just said is very obvious and blatant, and they've been doing it for years and years and years. So I don't want to in any way act as though I've got some revelation that other people haven't had for a long time. But I think that I think we have lost at some level a little bit of the thread in terms of how we think, and the focus on the mental health side has been maybe a little bit more on the idea that you take a medicine and you go out in the world as yourself, or you go into therapy and you go out into the world as yourself, and not much thought about what that world is and how you're going to be connected to it and who's going to connect to you out there. And I think that that's a piece that we need to reemphasize. We've been thinking about families, we've been thinking about community, but I think maybe we need to figure out how to get even more serious about it, if I can say it that way. And so unless somebody else has got something to say, I think we are at 9 o'clock, and I am going to introduce our first speaker. I am really, really excited to be doing that. Father Paul Abernathy is a Eastern Orthodox preacher at the St. Moses Church, Black Church in Pittsburgh. He is the director of Neighborhood Resilience, is it incorporated or project? Neighborhood Resilience Project, which is a trauma-informed initiative that has been going on for more than a decade and has been getting national accolades To have Father Paul amongst us is really an extraordinary treat. He's extremely busy, so for him to spend the time coming to take this time to talk to us, I think is really a real gift. That is a gift of community, and I am deeply appreciative, Father Paul, for your time and your effort to come here. Father Paul is a veteran. He is father of two. He is a person who has personal knowledge and action in addressing issues that are going on right now in the Middle East. And he is a notable person in the city of Pittsburgh, where we are extremely proud that he has decided to come and minister to a flock of people and to help us figure out how to mobilize community and spirit together. And I'm going to let you come up, Father Paul, and tell us a little bit about what you've been doing.
Yeah. Good morning. Let me begin by thanking my dear friend, Dr. Ken Thompson. I truly appreciate you more than words can say. And I have found myself in many settings, professional settings, having conversations about issues that are of great importance to the people, honestly, that we love. And I have always found that in those settings, Dr. Ken, you have always emerged as a vessel of light, as a beacon of hope, as a prophet of wisdom. And I am just so grateful for your deep friendship. Inasmuch as I don't know many of the rest of you, I was greeted this morning with such enthusiastic conversation that I truly am honored to be in your presence. I am well aware, not by detail, but certainly by impact, I am well aware of the heroic work that all of you are doing, the life-saving work, the sacrificial work that all of you are doing that is quite often thankless. But I will tell you, I see your work, as do many. And your work is the kind of work that you will not regret. Well, I wanted to reflect certainly on this notion of community as in regards to resilience and in the challenges and the times in which we face. Well, we are facing some challenging times. There's no question about this. I was reflecting a little bit on 2025 and what an extraordinary year it was for us in our work. Those days when we woke up only to find out that the money that we had acquired in partnership with our government had been erased overnight, to see that so many of our partners had to close their doors and reduce their services, to see even the behavior, not only at the federal level, but the behavior of government partners at every single level that had, from my point of view, become erratic, because let's not forget, we also had a budget impasse here in Pennsylvania, and I was told just a couple of days ago that I should expect us to have another one this year as well. Well, the system is being torn down. Well, I might say, this is not the way I would have done it. But since it is being done, I want to be honest about the legacy systems that we have inherited. Because the very same systems that are being torn down with very ill effect on our communities are also the very same systems that have obliterated community. They are the very same systems that have not served our people well at all. They are the same systems that many people in our communities fear and despise. They are the very same systems that many people in our communities, in fact, have prayed to tear down. And now that these systems are being torn down, whether we like it or not, the question, I believe, is how do we rebuild them? And how do we do it in a way that's better? How do we do it in a way that's more equitable? How do we do it in a way that is more just? Now, no system can replace community, and I think I truly appreciate the topic in hand, this real reflection on community and the power of community and the role of community. But just as Dr. Thompson said, I believe that we spend very little time speaking about community. What even is community? It's one, perhaps, of the most abused terms in professional settings that I can think of. People talk about the community. Father, we need to get the community. We need to get with the community. We need to have a community meeting. I can't tell you how many community meetings that I've been to where there are maybe 20 or 30 people, which happen to be the same 20 or 30 people that are at every other community meeting that is happening in that community. And people say the community has spoken. The community has spoken. 20, 30 people. There was a pastor who told me years ago that 80% of people don't come to community meetings because 80% of the people are in survival mode. And how we even structure this mechanism for community voice is incredibly disturbing. This idea that when we have community meetings or community listening sessions, as at times they're called, we expect to hold some kind of forum to invite people to. We want you to come to our forum. Now, I will tell you what I tell people in our community, because I've been part of those forums, I've been part of those tables, and anytime we enter these forums, anytime we sit at these tables, we are not playing by our own rules. And I tell people the best way to get an equitable seat at the table is to create the table yourself. Systems that create tables are often self-serving and not in the best interest of our communities. But systems are not so well positioned to partner with community tables that are being established by community members who have an eye on healthy community. And I will also say that it is often the case, I believe, when people talk about community, and we can say that really what community is there even to speak of, because there are many systems that have intentionally dismantled community over multiple generations. I can think of the Hill District in Pittsburgh, where I come from, not different than from Kensington in Philadelphia, which I believe has had a similar kind of history. Urban renewal, and James Baldwin, who famously said urban renewal is Negro removal. These government policies where the Lower Hill District was seized and 8,000 people were displaced, and of course, those who were people of color were not paid market rate for their houses. This was the beginning of the proliferation of public housing in the community, and this to be followed only by eventually the war on drugs and the crack epidemic. Although, you know, it wasn't called an epidemic. You know, when drugs hit one community, it is a public health issue, but when drugs hit another community, it is a criminal justice issue. And to see how the war on drugs has obliterated community, where we have generations of people who are raised in brokenness because their fathers are incarcerated. There was an administrator from a very high office from corrections, the Department of Corrections in Pennsylvania here, years ago told me one of the most profound moments in his career in corrections was as a young corrections officer standing in the prison yard one day and seeing three men come together for the first time. It was a grandfather, a son, and the grandson meeting in the prison yard. It was the first time that the grandson had met his father. He knew when he saw that something was terribly wrong. Now, community plays a significant role in mental and physical health. We have to acknowledge this. We have to also understand what community is. It's not a place. It's not a building. It is a set of relationships, and it happens, yes, at times in a geographic context. It also happens in the context of organizations like we find ourselves in today. In community, people have a sense of trust. In community, people have a sense of belonging. In community, people have a sense of safety. In community, people have a sense that we are going to care for one another. Now, this particular element of caring for one another, this is an element of community that is often directly confronted by systems, because when it comes to systems, the whole disposition is, what can I do for you? What am I going to do for you? It is me that is going to do something for you. Now, of course, there are times in which that is the appropriate disposition when there are these kinds of challenges. But the question does become, when does somebody have the dignity to also do something for you? If you were to understand the Latin root of the word community, communitas, it literally means coming together with a gift. That's what it means, communitas, coming together with a gift. That is to say that everybody in this particular group has something to offer. Everybody has something to give. And in this, everybody has some value in this community. Often it is the case that there are many people who are suffering from mental health challenges who are never given the opportunity themselves to give. People always want to treat them like some kind of guest. Why? Because when they do something for them, people say, I feel good about myself. This is very problematic, because to feel good about ourselves when we do a kind act for another person sometimes indicates that we have not entered into their pain. If we truly understood the reasons why they needed our support, we might not feel so good. As it pertains to some other thought around community, we might also refer to the Greek, koinonia. It's how it's often used, at least in my tradition, in that theological framework, koinonia. Now, this is an understanding of community that even goes beyond coming together with a gift. There are people who often translate it as fellowship in English, but this does not adequately communicate the meaning. This notion of koinonia refers to a deeper sense of oneness. It's not only that we belong, that we are connected to one another, it's that we actually see ourselves in the other, that we understand that the other is me, I am the other. We might also hear this idea expressed very powerfully in the African concept of Ubuntu. I am because we are. It's not just that we get along good together. It's not just that we are friends with one another. It's not just that we can call one another, but we understand that I exist because we exist. I am because there's a particular kind of oneness that this expressed. Now, the theologian St. Basil the Great, he was thinking about city. He was thinking about the metropolitan context, and he saw that as it pertained to the injustices, the iniquities that were found in societies, the community was truly being obliterated. So he talked in great detail about Keynote as in being a shared life, that there is a life that we have to share together. Is this a shared life? This is a question to ask. These are philosophical concepts that are very difficult to answer, but the question becomes, what is the shared life of this people? What is the shared life of this people? And what he said is that if we are outside of this shared life, focused on ourselves, he referred to it as, in the Greek, akinonitos, which means the unsociable, or it can be translated also as the unhuman. Anybody who is outside the shared life of humanity denies their own humanity. Akinonitos. I sometimes lament that we're not having these conversations about community, about what really does it mean, and also the role of community in community health and well-being. Of course, there has to be a treasured sense of feeling that comes also from shared experiences and a shared sense of history even, in fact. What is our narrative? What is the narrative that we create? Now, we struggle sometimes in certain of our communities in having a shared narrative. And I believe as Americans, we're in great dialogue about this. What is our narrative as Americans? One of the great challenges I think that we have is that we have not learned very well how to look at the dark spots of our past while at the same time acknowledging the power of repentance, so to speak. As if to say, if we made mistakes in our past, if we did something in our past, if we disregarded the dignity of human persons in certain communities in our past, then we can never have a viable nation, that we can never have an honored nation, that we could never have an exalted nation. But this idea that perhaps to be a great nation is to acknowledge these mistakes, these times when we had denied the dignity of certain human beings, and also acknowledge the power of repentance, that with healing we can forge together a new community, that we have to have the ability to look at the stains of our past and develop a shared narrative that creates a hopeful future, a pathway forward. This feeling, this sort of shared life, anthropologists might say, is fundamental to human existence. And it, of course, can be manifested in neighborhoods, companies, schools, places of faith. These are all contexts for these kinds of communities. And communities can be nested in one another. So it is true that you can have a vibrant kind of community where there's another organization that's nested in, where there's a house of worship that's nested in, that's also a community. So these are communities that are nested within one another. Now we have to look at the power of these communities as it pertains to resilience and mental health, psychiatric care, and also that these communities establish institutions. This is a very important point that I want to explore a little bit today, that these communities, they establish for themselves institutions. It's not always that the institutions are the large medical systems or hospitals or universities. Certainly they're institutions, but in many of our communities, we have established our own institutions. I remember when COVID first happened, I learned very quickly, because of course we had no plan and there were limited resources. I learned very quickly that with limited resources and no plan, those resources, what resources that were available, were not coming to our community. I figured that out in the first few days. But I also knew that in our community, we had our own institutions. There was a remarkable professor of religion at Princeton University, Dr. Albert Rabbitoe. He was the foremost expert on slave religion in the United States. And And he characterized the slave church as, and I quote, the invisible institution. It was very much an institution that was organized under the most brutal kinds of trauma and circumstances. And I often think of the slave experiences. I think in my own ancestors. I think of my great-grandparents' generation and the extraordinary traumas that they went through. But what I realized is that they themselves had institutions and social networks that were, in fact, therapeutic. Like it is said in the trauma-informed world, you don't have to be a therapist to be therapeutic. And these communities and these community institutions were, in fact, therapeutic. And Dr. Albert Rabbitoe makes the case that this vibrant black church that was quite extraordinary, otherworldly, some might say, certainly radical in its disposition towards God and one another, was not even seen by the slaveholding class. They didn't even know it existed. In fact, you might have heard that old spiritual steal away to Jesus. That was a signal, actually, for slaves to slip off into the woods at places that they called hush harbors, where they would hold secret all-night vigils together in community. That these slave owners had no idea that these things were happening. He says the invisible institution. What I realize now in this particular day and age is that in many of our communities, we have also invisible institutions. They're known to us. They're known well to us. We engage with them every single day. Our communities could not exist were it not for these institutions. And yet these institutions are not recognized by broader systems. They're not leveraged by broader systems. These institutions rarely, if ever, have a chance to lead. In Allegheny County, there was a $50 million investment in violence reduction by the county, something perhaps to be celebrated, except this, that all of the decisions and how this money is to be spent is being made by people who do not live in these communities. The vast majority of this issue impacts African Americans. None of the people making the decisions are black. But they would describe themselves as being quite progressive. If we had institutions that developed strategies, community institutions that were incorporated into our systems of care, how differently would our systems be? And we have to understand how important it is to leverage those systems as it pertains to psychiatric treatment. And herein lies another reality of these particular institutions, is that psychiatric challenges are exacerbated by things like basic needs. Not long ago, there was a gentleman who was in our headquarters, our headquarter office in the Hill District in Pittsburgh, and someone knocked frantically at my door, and they said, "Father, please, we need you to come down and talk to this gentleman. He is very elevated. He is very angry." And I went down, and he was yelling and screaming and carrying on. People were, of course, concerned. People were afraid. Thank God that in our particular institution, our particular organization, people are prepared, and they are committed to being with a young man such as he. I quickly learned that this young man had psychiatric challenges that he was struggling with. I learned also that he was suffering from substance abuse. I learned also that he was suffering from substance abuse. And so he was angry. He was struggling with psychiatric challenges. He was struggling with his addiction, and he was hungry. And I remember having this conversation with him. And I got to this point in the conversation where I'm trying to understand what it is that he needs. When he finally says to me, "Well, Father, to be honest with you, if I could just have something to eat. if I could just have something to eat. It's very important. There was a woman in the community one time, and she said to me, "Father, I don't like my therapist." I said, "Really? Why?" And she said, "My therapist told me that I'm depressed." I said, "Oh, would you disagree with the diagnosis?" She said, "Yes, I'm not depressed. I just need help paying my light bill." There are so many times in community, even when I've been sitting with young men who believe that they are being targeted. It's not an unfounded belief. It's not an unfounded concern. They believe that they're being targeted. And some might say they have anxiety. But truth be told, until we get them to a point where they're not going to be killed, there's no treatment that will enable that anxiety to subside. Now, there's one other element that I want to really explore about community, an idea I want to offer that I hope generates some kind of discussion, and that is a conversation around love and the power of love, because I don't believe that we can talk about community without also talking about love. And what I want to present this morning is community as a context in which love can be actualized. Now, in preparing for my remarks this morning, I was very fascinated to do some learning around the research on love, and I was very pleased to find out that pertaining to research around love, what researchers agree on is that love is fundamental to mental and physical health. They agree on that. What they don't necessarily agree on is what love is, because it's a very elusive term. But I will tell you, for us as humans, it's perhaps fundamental to our existence. I will give a few definitions of love, if I may. Dr. Sarah Aljo, and she's done a lot of work on love research, and she defines love as an other-focused, pleasantly experienced, self-transcendent, motivational state. An other-focused, pleasantly experienced, self-transcendent, motivational state. Plato, the philosopher, in his work, The Symposium, he defines love as the desire for perpetual possession of goodness, beauty, and immortality. It's remarkable to me. We've been doing a lot of work around beauty in community, in the healing quality of aesthetics, actually. I have a wonderful friend of mine, Jeff Murray. He's an architect. He's internationally renowned. He resides in Pittsburgh. And one of the things that I really learned from him is that in architecture, beauty is reserved for people of privilege. Why is that? There was a group of young city children, I was told by a woman, heard me speak once, heard I was in the Hill District. There's a group of young city children that was taken to a Eastern Orthodox church in Canonsburg outside of Pittsburgh as part of a Greek cultural immersion experience. So they were being exposed to Greek culture, and they took them to the church to show them how Greek architecture is, or religious architecture in Greece is. And it was interesting because when they were organizing the presentation, people were curious. What kind of questions would these children had? Understanding they probably never had been exposed to Greek culture. They probably were unfamiliar with some of the religious artwork that they would see or what have you. And the presentation happens, and people are very curious as to what are these children going to ask. But then this little hand goes up. Little boy named Darius. First question. This is what he asks. Why can't we have something this beautiful in the hill? Why is that? Footnote to the story of that little boy. living in public housing shortly after that incident, was shot and killed by a stray bullet sitting out front of his apartment. That's why this woman was imploring me, please put something that beautiful in the hill. That beauty can inspire transcendence. We have to think about this in community. The Apostle John in the Christian tradition, he says, "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God. He who loves is born of God and knows God." This idea that to love is to enter the divine. Martin Luther King, he says something very remarkable. He talks about agape, this kind of divine love, is the love of God operating in the human heart. So this idea that there's something transcendent about that kind of love. And we can also say that love is sacrificial. That love will suffer long. And part of the challenge is that we have systems that are working to administer clinical care to people, and of course I understand they're not structured for this, and perhaps many would say it's not the appropriate setting for this, but they're doing this work without facilitating love. But we need love, and the question is, where are people to be loved? And it's more even, I was told very recently by a clinician, that even in clinical training, it's more, there's more of an emphasis on defending, protecting ourselves. But I think out in community, while the perhaps clinical providers are busy protecting themselves, we find ourselves somehow opening our hearts and our doors to the very people the clinical systems are protecting themselves from, and at all hours of the night. That's what it means, to be a pastor in these communities. We're not done at 5 p.m. We can't say, oh, it's Saturday, I can't deal with you. There was a schizophrenic woman who came to our facility the other day, and I'm so grateful because she was walking around saying where I couldn't find anywhere where the doors were open. I couldn't find anywhere at all that had open doors, but I need someone. And this woman was saying that she needed specifically, she was asking for a priest because she said, I am possessed by a demon. Now, the thing that I understood is that I had to have a good partnership with behavioral health. And when she came in, she asked me to pray. Did I pray? Absolutely, I prayed. But I then was in a position to get her immediately that day assessed by a psychologist who diagnosed her right then and there as a schizophrenic. And by that evening, she was in WIPIC for clinical treatment. But I remember, as the day was drawing to a close, as we were facilitating her care, her big concern was, what happens at 5 p.m.? Because isn't that when everything closes? What does happen at 5 p.m. when everything closes? The community happens at 5 p.m. when everything closes. So we have to have that kind of community. Dr. Anna Machen from Oxford, an anthropologist from Oxford, she goes on to say that love is a human need. It's fundamental to us as the food we eat and the air that we breathe. She goes on to say that love stems from cooperation, and cooperation is our route to survival. Now, many of our communities have really lost their capacity to love because institutions and systems have just obliterated a sense of community in the truest sense. So when it becomes, when it comes time to enter those community meetings and everybody comes into these community meetings half-cocked, ready to fight, because they've got significant trauma. And by the way, with this, the psychologist Julianne Holt-Lunted and her colleagues in 2010, they concluded that being in a supportive social network reduced the risk of mortality by 50%, that we're going to live longer if we are in community with one another. Well, what we have to understand is that in these community meetings, there's so much stress. People come in so hyper-vigilant that they often descend into chaos. People don't believe that they can feel free to offer their voice because their voice is going to be challenged. People are afraid even to speak in these community settings because trauma has undermined a sense of community to very, very extreme degrees. So, love is extremely important. Now, as it pertains to the way in which we have to understand a new perspective on this work in community, I believe that it's very important that we have to be ourselves, play a leading role in helping build community and facilitate community. We have to. What's really been interesting to me is running a nonprofit that's really focused on, we say, facilitating trauma-affected community to resilient healing and healthy community. That's the mission of the Neighborhood Resilience Project. And what's so interesting to me is how many conversations that I have that are, in fact, difficult conversations with funders. Why? Because it just doesn't fit into any of their buckets. When you say, well, who's the big community builder? Who's funding the community building work? Who's doing that? People say, well, we're into basic needs. That's, by the way, part of building community. People would say, we're into social services. I understand we need that to build community. Well, people would say, well, we're into workforce development. I know Americans, we love that one. Workforce development. Okay, but how about building community? And I was even been told by funders, well, I don't know, you just don't seem really to fit in any of the buckets. Maybe you have the wrong buckets. Maybe the wrong buckets. That young man who was the schizophrenic, who was suffering an addiction, who was also hungry, that young man told me that the reason why he only liked to deal with us, this is what he told me not 2 weeks ago. He said, because you, unlike others, believe that change is possible for me. Everywhere that I go, these institutions don't believe that change is truly possible for me. Maybe they might talk like it, they might say, but they don't truly believe it. They don't believe in the transcendent, transformative power of love the same way that we believe it. And that doesn't mean that everything is always perfect and easy. It certainly doesn't mean that. But what it does mean, my dearly beloved, is that change is possible, that we believe that change is possible. Things need to change in our neighborhoods. And we can play a major role in leveraging invisible institutions in these communities to better build community in these neighborhoods so that love can be actualized as a healing agent among a population suffering with psychiatric challenges. I wanted to share with you one example of this kind of partnership that we have with WIPIC in Pittsburgh. And the president of the hospital, Dr. Deborah Brodeen, she called me up. She said, Father, I'd like to come down and see you. Well, so she came down, and we were sitting together. She said, Father, here's the problem that we have. We have a lot of psychiatric patients in community that they come in the community, and we just have to discharge them. When they go back into community, we lose them completely. We just can't keep up with them. There's no follow-up care. She said, what I was thinking is, because you have this extraordinary network of community members who are now participating, why Why do we have a network of community members who are participating? Because the way we understand community is that everybody comes together, has a gift. What has this person have to offer to his or her community? There's a gentleman working with us. He said to me one day, Father, I spent my whole life, he got out of the state penitentiary. He spent much of his life incarcerated. He said, Father, I spent my whole life tearing down this community. Now I want to spend the rest of my life building it up. We ought to help him do that. We ought to help him play a role. She said, I know you have these people. What if we trained these people as peers? What if we brought them into the hospital and built relations before they discharged them into the community? And what if then these people stayed with them through that community transition and in community with them? So we did it. You know what's remarkable about these peers? Because I know them. They came together. They had a gift to offer. We had the perfect framework to help them actualize love. And what I witnessed is they did not only simply serve and support these patients when they were discharged from WIPIC, they loved them. Thanksgiving Day, we're always open. We start, we have a church service, and then we have a meal and open, and I'm always so amazed at how many of them, they pop in, Happy Thanksgiving, Father. Can't stay too long, though. I got to run. They're on their way to go to those living rooms. They're going to those apartments where those patients were discharged and have nobody. They don't have anybody, Father. I'm just going to go love on them for a little while. Well, a couple of things just for us to consider as we close. Firstly, and this perhaps is our challenge that I would offer, how might we design new systems that integrate community, voice, and these invisible institutions that also prioritize self-determination? The winds of change are blowing, not only in the United States, but around the world. The age of colonial imperialism is drawing to a close. This is the age of self-determination, overseas and here. And we have to honor this self-determination. But by what mechanism will we allow these kinds of new systems to be built that does, in fact, make a way for true self-determination, community voice, and incorporate these invisible community institutions as part of the broader system? Secondly, we have to map and engage these local community institutions so that we can partner with, we can forge partnerships with them, between them and psychiatric providers for seamless transitions from clinical care to community care, true community care. We have to have these partnerships. We have to build these partnerships with formal institutions. But how do we do this? This is the question I would offer for us to explore. And thirdly, and finally, and perhaps most profoundly, I would like to submit to the dialogue a conversation around love. How do we operationalize love? We might not be able to define it so neatly, might not fit into any sort of clinical definition, but it is very real in human experience. How do we operationalize love as a healing agent? What does it mean to define the practices, the settings, and the behaviors that make love manifest in our communities? And how does this love become a fundamental element of community-based support? It has been a great honor to be with all of you this morning. I want to close simply by saying that change truly is possible. That these are the days when the status quo is no longer relevant. In our communities, we are not only working for change, we expect it. And despite all that has happened in recent months around the world, there is a groundswell of hope that I am sensing that is building and growing. There is a movement that is gripping the hearts of many forgotten people in the United States and indeed around the world. There is an opportunity for us to forge a new future in the truest sense. And this is a time when we have to consider for ourselves what not only does it mean to be a psychiatrist, but a just psychiatrist. This is a time in which we have to examine the role that our profession plays in the liberation of oppressed peoples. This is a time when we have to examine and even challenge ourselves to be leaders among a people of leaders. That if we could just join together and have community in the most profound sense of the term, a community in which we are expressing a shared life rooted in love, that we will see things we never thought was possible. It is a great honor for me to be here with all of you. And I truly look forward to celebrating the remarkable contributions that all of you will continue to make in the lives of suffering people. And may God bless and keep you. Amen.
Wow.
Don't go away. We have a couple of minutes, and I have to be honest with you, that was, for me, Father Paul, right on hit the nail on the head. Just exactly what we had hoped you would think about saying, and then you took it even further. Last night at dinner, a bunch of us were sitting around, and as is our wont, we had a kind of open mic discussion about what's going on in the world that we live in and the challenges that we're facing. And one of the things that we felt, talking about the upcoming 250th anniversary of the founding of this particular country, was what could we dream for? What could we dream for? That if we were in a moment that we could actually recognize the significance of us as a country, as a community, for 250 years, how could we find a way to make that meaningful? And the challenge that we came up with, which I think you have given us the answer to, was that we really have felt that there is so little happening and we feel so assaulted all the time that we've almost begun to stop dreaming of things. That we've begun to think that the best we can do is hang on to the very least of what we already have. And what you just said to us is it is in us, and it is in the love between us that we can find the inspiration to do something that is beautiful, that is meaningful, and that we can have a place in a world that that this moment we can barely imagine if we unleash ourselves and our desires for a better world. So for that, I really want to thank you, and I want to just allow this room to have an opportunity to share any thoughts or feelings or reactions to this stirring message that we have just heard. Gordon, do we have a way to give people a mic?
Thanks so very much. I'm struck by the masterful combination of validating us and challenging us at the same time. It's so important to do, and to create that sense of uncertainty and discomfort at the same time that hope is stimulated. It's very hard to do, but I think you've done that. And I'm experiencing it personally, and I think many of us are. So thank you. I also want to make the point, you talk about the young man who has mental health challenges and substance use challenges who's hungry, and how the hunger exacerbates the condition. I'd like to suggest that the hunger and all of the deprivations and stigmatization and racism not just exacerbates the situation, but creates it in many cases. And we need to look at it from the point of view of changing our epistemology a little bit. Beautiful. It's not just about genes. It's not just about inheritance. It's not just about, you know, the biology. It's about life as we live it.
That's beautiful, Doc. I am so I'm so moved by your statement, and I appreciate you teaching me. It certainly validates my understanding and even my experience. People, sometimes they will say there's trauma in every community, and that's true. But I also will tell you, and this is statistically true, there's just not the same levels of trauma in every community. The way in which people have suffered day in and day out over many generations is nothing short of extraordinary. And I am so inspired to hear that there's a willingness on the part of a professional to really challenge the epistemology of this. We have to develop our understanding of these things. And I am very encouraged that conversations like this, they are happening more. I mean, the very fact that we are having a conference, that you all are having a conference in which this is the topic you're exploring is very hopeful for me. So I strongly, I appreciate what you're saying, and I certainly strongly support and encourage it. Thank you.
Anyone else have a comment? Or Crystal, you look like you got something. Yeah. Ralph.
I really appreciated your speech, and I thought it was just really inspirational. And some of the questions that I had, you talked about the trauma that's brought when we have community events and people wanting to attack each other just because they've had so much experience and are so defensive because they don't feel safe and loved. How do you overcome that?
This is a wonderful question. So in our instance, one of the things that I really learned is that on the one hand, someone might try to say a long-standing community meeting and say, how do we rehabilitate this meeting? Now, what in our case has been much more effective is to establish completely new frameworks by which these conversations are held. And actually, what is very important for us is, and this often greatly changes the dynamic, is to hold these conversations where people live. It's not dissimilar from what Dr. Adalberto is doing in Brazil, but where these people live. So what we have gone so far as to do is to actually say, what block of people do we want to have a conversation with? Because we know that a lot of people aren't coming to us, so we have to go to them. And when are they going to be there? And what we've done is shut the road down, put up a pop-up tent in the middle of the block, after having spent weeks engaging the people in this particular block and bringing them together for a conversation. And of course, what we also have to do is we have to imbue this conversation with the kind of values that truly express, that maybe facilitate a healthy conversation. Because people, one of the challenges in many of these community meetings is that people have been trained, they are trained in community organizing. And, I went through community organizer training too, like many people in our community. And of course, the old Alinsky style organizing, if anybody's been through any of the, yes, I know, there's always one or two of you out there. What we're really trained to do is agitate. The worldview in this community organizing is also not about community building. It in many ways acknowledges other parties and interests in community as chess pieces to be manipulated towards a political end. We have to have a different way of training people how to organize in community. And we've actually developed a role we call behavioral health community organizer. What they're trained to do is to build community that is in fact therapeutic in its experience. You know, this is the great experience. This is what we're really trying to do. Build a community that's therapeutic in its experience, and we've been measuring the impact of this on these particular blocks, and we've seen over time how health and well-being is improved in these blocks. One fascinating statistic, if I may share, is that we did a pilot in the Upper Hill District where we were just going from block to block to block to block, where we were engaging these blocks at a time, putting up the tents, having these conversations with people, sitting on their porches in living rooms and these kinds of things, and really incorporating their voice into a broad, what was the word we used? Tapestry. We have to build a tapestry over time and collect and gather these voices. There's going to be some people, you know, when you have a room full of 100 people, they're going to be first to the mic. Anytime we had all the priests get together, I always say, the bishops go, are there any questions? I know who's going to be the first three up to the mic every single time. And some of the best questions that people will ask will come up after the whole thing's over, one-on-one with the bishop. So we have to create these settings that are smaller, that have more equitable access to voice. As we've done this, what's really fascinating is we've been able to demonstrate improved health and well-being over a period of time in the same area. The other statistic that we just took a look at is the homicide rates in these areas. They trend upwards. 2017, there's a break. 2017 is when we concluded our first block intervention. After 2017, the homicides begin trending downward. In this particular pilot area, where we did 8 of these sort of block interventions, we would call them, where we just set up the tents and pull people together and work to build community with people, work to incorporate their voice in this broad tapestry, this community map of where we're going together. Homicides began trending downward until they hit 0. And in this particular area, we haven't had a single homicide for 5 years. I think we have to take a look at this and how we're really, you know, instead of trying to rehabilitate these old community meetings that are like, what are they, 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Wednesday? I mean, come on. Or you know, 6 o'clock in the evening, and a single mother with 3 kids, and she's like, well, I'll tell you where I'm not going. I'm not going there. But we can go to them. And I think, how do we do that? And how are we trained to do that? And how do we really take a different look at community organizing as a community building therapeutic, with the role that behavioral health has in this? Now, this is the last thing that I'll say. I think it's extremely important. When I sit and I talk to developers, you know what they know how to do? They know how to access capital from banks and work with, as general contractors. That's what they know how to do. You're saying you're going to develop our community and that's your expertise? Here's this. What I'm saying is that when we talk about who's going to be the community, the brain trust to develop our communities, how about we have some behavioral health folks at that level? How about your thought leaders when it comes to helping us understand how to develop our communities? Why don't we have psychiatrists in that role of community development? Why don't we have psychologists in that role as community development? Yes, we should. And until we do, we're never going to facilitate community development in a way that leads to resilient, healing, and healthy community. And of course, how we're able to incorporate this voice into that kind of thought partnership is going to be extremely effective.
Thanks.
Yes, we got 2 more, and then I think we'll probably have to stop.
I just want to say thank you very much. And a couple of things. So thinking about architecture, I miss my porch. It was the way in which we were in our neighborhood, and we don't have porches anymore. We have houses that have things in the back. You all hide and so forth. So just an observation. And want to a shout out to you, as well as someone that is a colleague, Father Greg Boyle, out in East LA, a lovely Jesuit who is a founder of the Homeboys. And really, I'll just read some of the books which I have been touched by: Tattoos on the Heart, The Whole Language, The Power of Extravagant Tenderness, which you've spoken about today, and then Barking to the Choir, The Power of Radical Kinship. So encourage everybody, if you've not heard of him, he will be at Chautauqua. So I would love for you to be able to have an opportunity. I don't know whether you will or not, but Chautauqua 9th week at the Sunday Ecumenical. I'd love for us to come together.
Oh, you know, I neglected to have people introduce themselves when they spoke. And Marianne, you might just say,
Marianne Alba, child and adolescent psychiatrist out of Erie, Pennsylvania.
and Ralph, you should introduce yourself as well.
I'm Ralph Kapikoff. I'm director of mobile psych rehab in Holcomb.
Okay, we got time for one more. I do want to say one thing. Oh, Gordon, I forgot.
Gordon Hodis, child and adolescent psychiatrist. I've been consulting to the Children's Bureau in OMSOS for many years.
Hi, my name is Rachel, and I was just very moved by so much of what you said. I had a completely different plan for my life, and it was changed by a mental health crisis. And I just want to say, thank you for seeing us, because I think even before we can see the table, we have to feel like we're seen. So thank you.
Eileen gets the last one.
Hi, my name is Eileen Diaz. I'm from Penn State Health. I'm a child analyst and psychiatrist. So my question is more about trust. And how are we able to actually bring up trust when there's so mistrust of these systems that have been engaged with trauma throughout time? So I just want your perspectives to figure out how that could be done.
Thank you. This is a very, very important point. As of course we all know, how do we really build trust? So one thing I learned a long time ago is that the best way to show someone that you're trustworthy, or to teach somebody that you're trustworthy, is to demonstrate that you're trustworthy. I remember there was when I was just out of seminary, first in the community, and people, of course, they're really hardened, and people trying to figure out, oh, okay, new preacher in the community, like all of them. We'll see if he lasts. We'll see if he lasts. And, you know, he's talking about doing nice things. Isn't that good? Isn't that nice? And I remember there was a woman who, she sat down. I sat down with her. I'm trying to meet people in the community. And she said, oh, you're here to do good things for the community. That's nice. I like that. That's nice. She said, I have a niece who has 4 children, and none of them have beds. That's all she said. I said, okay, I think maybe we could get them beds. Now, when I left that meeting, I knew that I had to come up with 5 beds. That's what I knew. What I knew is that she gave me an opportunity to show her that she could trust me. And that opportunity was very, honestly, real. When I showed up with those beds, to this very day, you know what she said? She said, you go talk to Father Paul. You can trust him. The way in which we generally approach trust is we look at it like, you just, look, you can listen to me. Hey, trust me, it's me. But what we train our teams to look for is the opportunity to demonstrate trust. You have to look for that. And you know, the thing about this is, you might say getting beds, okay? It's a material thing. Now, if a mother were to say, I lost my son, you know, how to erase that trauma, that's impossible. We can't erase that trauma. We can't bring her son back, but you can get a new bed. In some sometimes we just have to look for those, we might see them as low-hanging fruit. Easy ways, practical ways to demonstrate that you can trust us. And there's no better way to say, I hear you, than to show up with an answer to their problem. Because if someone says, I'm sleeping on the floor, and you show up with a bed, do you know what you have just demonstrated? That you have heard them. We have to train our teams to look for those opportunities and to do that. The problem is, many of us don't have budgets, quote unquote budgets, where we have resources that we can use to demonstrate trust. What are you talking about? Is that even in anybody's budget? Where we say, listen, you got to trust me. I got to use this money however I believe that I need to use this money. It might be beds this week. It might be a light bill the next week. It might be, I'm a behavioral health provider. Why should I do that? Because they need to trust you. And I'm not trying to make caseworkers out of you. And maybe you're not the ones that do it if you're a clinician. But you have to have that kind of partnership and team so that there's resources that can do something simple like that so that people can say, you know what, she really heard me. They can sleep. And if we do that, if we focus on those kinds of things, we'll build the trust. And we have to focus on those kinds of things. We'll build the trust. Thank you, Doc.
I need a glass to clink like Ken last night. So I'm sorry to cut the break short, but appreciate you all finding your way back. Well, I'm happy to continue the conversation around community. I'm going to introduce Melissa Patty, who's the Director of Maternal and Infant Health Initiatives at the March of Dimes. And she's going to talk a little bit about the March of Dimes and the great work that they're doing in the mental health space. But she's really here to talk about community and community building. I didn't know Melissa, and I don't even know how we really got connected. Maybe Sierra. It all just came together. We went out to breakfast one morning, and we were just sort of talking about maternal mental health, and we really got on to this conversation around community, and she started talking about mutual aid and some of the things that she was doing within her own community to bring people together, and I think that we're probably both big believers that community is the answer. So I'm very pleased to introduce Melissa Patty to talk to us more about community.
Good morning. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Melissa. I'm a clinical social worker with a background in ecosystemic structural family therapy. The director of maternal and infant health at our regional March of Dimes. I also am a reproductive health perinatal focused psychotherapist at the Postpartum Stress Center, where I do individual, couples, and sometimes family therapy through that space. So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of why I started really investing in community building in my neighborhood. And when I'm talking about community, I'm talking about people that live in a close geographical, proximity. That's what I'm talking about today. As we discussed earlier today, there's lots of different communities that exist within my neighborhood community, but I'm really talking about the closeness. And I live in Northwest Philadelphia, so there's a lot of closeness. And so I know that this is, my experience of community building is going to look different than it would look for folks in more rural areas, but I think that there's some tangible opportunity that can transcend. So I'm going to talk a little bit, and a lot of this is kind of foundational stuff that we have all been talking about, but I'm going to go through it. And my lens for kind of all of this is around maternal mental health and supporting parents and families. So I've already introduced myself. This is what we're going through today. But in the past few years, I've been focused on maternal mental health for a really long time, but through March of Dimes, we do a lot of advocacy around maternal mental health. We do a lot of education and programming. If you're not familiar with March of Dimes, we've been around for a really long time, since the 30s. Originally, we were founded to fund the research that eradicated, well, sort of eradicated, I can't really say that anymore, polio. And then have pivoted as like a kind of flexible force in public health, where we deal with maternal mortality and infant mortality and premature birth, and now really focusing on racial disparities in maternal and infant health outcomes and addressing health equity gaps. So we do that through research, through advocacy, through education, and some programming. But we in Pennsylvania have been really focused on maternal mental health, and I'll get to the why behind that in a little bit. But, really doing a lot of kind of research the past few years and talking about social isolation as it relates to parents. And even in my therapy practice, hearing from pregnant folks and new moms, parents, just about how lonely and isolated they are, and really disconnected from what their idea of community would be, and from the world, and really relying on social media as a way to feel connected to other parents, which is a really dangerous place for parents to be and live, because there's so many there's so much misinformation on social media about the experience of parenthood and about the experience of pregnancy. And I think it kind of ranges in that it is either like parenthood should be the most amazing time of your life and having a baby is such a blessing, and it's the only thing that matters is that you have a healthy baby, and can be very dismissive and isolating for folks who don't have that experience, which we know at least 25% of folks experience birth trauma. So I've been very interested in how social isolation relates to parents and health conditions. We're seeing such an increase in pregnant folks entering into pregnancy with a chronic health condition. And learned a lot about how the experience of social isolation and loneliness increases your risk of chronic health conditions and things like heart disease and stroke and dementia, and just overall inflammation in your body. And that experience, especially for parents of color, has a profound experience on their pregnancy journey and postpartum experiences. In 2024, before the new federal administration kind of took over, the Surgeon General did a whole report on isolation and found that 65% of parents said that they experience loneliness. And when I'm talking to folks in my therapy practice and folks on my block and folks who live nearby, it's the same kind of conversation. Where is the village that everyone talks about? I expected that when I had a baby, people would show up for me, and they don't. And they don't in the way that they imagined that they would, and they're alone, and especially if they're first-time parents or they have medical complications in their own bodies or in their baby's bodies, or they have a NICU stay, they are struggling to figure out, where do I go? Who can I talk to? How much is it gonna cost? I have to get back to work. We don't have paid family leave in Pennsylvania. Who is gonna care for my baby if I have to go back to work to pay for everything? And so this kind of realization in postpartum can be incredibly devastating. I don't have anyone nearby. My parents aren't showing up the way, or they're still working. They're not able to show up in the way. My friends have their own things going on. I'm alone with this baby and all of the other circumstances happening in my life. And that meaning is so profound. And it really sets the stage for life, for that baby's life, for the stories of their birth. And when I first got into was first inspired to get into maternal and infant health, I was a home visiting family therapist in North Philadelphia. And so was just going into people's homes. And in our model of therapy, the child is the symptom bearer of all of the issues that the family has. And so in that model, we also do a history storytelling kind of activity with the families. And over and over and over again, I heard, well, my pregnancy with this baby was so hard, and I didn't get adequate prenatal care, or I experienced racial bias, or postpartum was really awful, and because we're postpartum forever once you have a baby. But in that period, that experience of having a postpartum mental health issue can really change the way you bond with your baby, which also can change the way your baby develops. So these experiences of not having support in that critical, life-changing, transformational time had a lifetime of influence on the parents, the community, and those children. Because at the core of community health has to be maternal and infant health. And if we're not caring for our moms and babies in these ways, we're not caring for our communities. So, all of that to say, and I'd also want to tell, like, you know, this has changed kind of profoundly in the past couple of years. We did a, and I'm going to need someone to keep me on track. I forgot to bring my phone up here. But we had a community baby shower. And for those of you who are not familiar with community baby showers, they are where typically like organizations and people get together and they rally resources and they bring truckloads of diapers and wipes and baby clothes and formula and all these things for, you know, under-resourced communities to be able to access those materials, which are incredibly expensive and hard to obtain for a lot of families. And in our most recent community baby shower last month, we had a group of immigrant families come. And we were talking about maternal mental health, and we were talking about, like, okay, what is something you want to hold on to? What's something you want to release? And these families were talking about how desperately they wanted to release the grief that they have because their family members had been taken, and now they were isolated and alone, and afraid to access support and resources. And I was grateful that they were there, but I'm saying this just is that things are changing, people are afraid, and their families are being destroyed, and we still have children to raise. So all this and I'm not going to focus on the doom and gloom much longer, but all of this increases risk of really severe perinatal mental health issues. And perinatal mental health issues are the leading cause of pregnancy complications in the United States at this point. And maternal mental health and accidental overdose, are the leading cause of maternal death in Pennsylvania. This is critical. Mothers are dying. We have one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the nation. And I'm in Philadelphia, and it's even higher there. So this is the lens in which I have been thinking about community building, is what can we do to address these issues? What can we do to show up for parents and support parents and families so that they can thrive and the rest of our communities can thrive? So here's some solutions that, you know, come from various sources on the internet. So number one, and I'm going to talk about this in a more tangible, practical way, is just advocating for and showing up for your physical spaces where you live, right? Libraries, parks, rec centers, community centers, places where people convene, right? Making sure that those places exist, advocating for funding so that they can continue to exist, and participating in them, right? I mean, someone talked about not having soups anymore. Sure, but do you have a library? Do you have a park? Do you have a child care center? We have places within our communities, no matter what they look like, where people rely on resources and support. How can we show up in those spaces and make sure that they are safe and clean and places where people want to go? We also need affordable and accessible programs that can create the village that we lack, right? So that's free pre-K, right? That's affordable public school, or it's public schools that are safe and offer high quality education. After school programs, summer camps. I don't know how many of you have children that have to go to summer camp, but I do. And thousands of dollars. How are you supposed to work and do that? How? And affordable childcare. So this, I was talking about this last year for the social work conference and did some research on childcare costs in our country. And more than 40% of families struggle to find affordable childcare. And the childcare costs in Pennsylvania have increased almost 20% in the past 5 years. And for folks that have 2 children, that's going to be 25% of their income, if not more. It is more than rent in most places. One of my best friends from childhood lives in Boston. She's about to have her first baby. She told me that she is looking at childcare now for her 1 child, and it is going to be $3,200 a month for infant care. It is prohibitive. People cannot afford to live and also have childcare. So we need all of these things, right? We need community-focused and centered healthcare. And we also need support, like community health workers, community doulas, behavioral health folks that are connected to the community and peer support. We need mutual aid, which I will talk more about. But places like food banks and pantries and community fridges, a lot of these spaces and people mobilized during COVID, and some of them still exist, a lot of them don't anymore. I saw when we had SNAP shut down earlier well, I don't even remember what it was, it's all blending together. Lots of folks came together to offer support and meal trains and all these things to families, but then that goes away. The struggle does not go away. It's not just when it's convenient and when it's on the news. We have to build sustainable mutual aid systems that can exist continually. So, when you zoom out and you look at all of these things that we need, universal health care, basic income programs, free pre-K, safe schools, it's really overwhelming because it's all systemic. All systemic issues all require a lot of funding that our federal government has made it very clear that they are not willing to invest in, right? So extremely overwhelming. And so what I want us to do is keep these things in mind. We need to continue to advocate and show up and demand these things because we deserve them, but not to be like, "Ooh, we can't, how do we achieve these things?" Maybe not in my lifetime, but I can keep chipping away at it, but also what can I do, right? So this has been my experience of me and my neighbors, which I'm gonna get into, of this experience of zooming out and being like, oh my gosh, there's too much to do. And then really zooming all the way back in to my block, my address, my street, the people who live next to me, and what can I do here? So here's just some things to do, and then I'm gonna get into things I've done. So number one, just be outside. It's one of the things that has made the most profound difference on my experience with my neighbors is speaking to people when I walk down the street and I see them. Just don't avoid eye contact, literally just saying hello. And sometimes that, if I pause enough, a conversation starts. I am walking to the gym on the end of my block, right? I'm walking to the bus, I'm walking to the library. Other people are walking their dogs. Say hello, and that is a good place to start. And again, I already talked about public spaces, but thinking about what public spaces exist in your neighborhood, in your, where people convene, and how can you show up there? What volunteer opportunities exist? What kind of events happen? How can you experience joy with your neighbors? How can you show up and participate and learn more about them? And host something, and we'll get into that. Oh, and please participate and learn more about your local government, right? All of these, we're focused on the federal government because it's hard to ignore and they're very loud, and our state government as well. But local government has so much impact on how we experience our day-to-day lives. I rely on SEPTA. Without my local government and state government, SEPTA wouldn't be operating, and it didn't for a hot minute. And also, my library, which is on the end of my block, shuts down for a couple of weeks every summer because the HVAC is broken. How do we advocate and build relationships with our local government and participate in our local government so we can ensure that the social infrastructure that we need is well funded and resourced? All right. So I'm really excited to talk about my experience with community building on my block because it has gone remarkably well. And I talked about it last year a little bit, and it has grown so much. And I just want to also say that I live, in a privileged space, right? I live on a block in Northwest Philly. We have a library. It is a diverse block, both racially, ethnically, in values, in age, in where people come from. But me and my neighbors have a lot of resources available to us, and that is not true of a lot of communities in our country. And so I just want to say that we're doing this also from a privileged perspective. But right after the election, the federal election, a lot of I had some relationships with the neighbors. When we have kids, the kids really had a lot of connections, seeing each other on the block and playing, but I hadn't built a lot of relationships with my neighbors at that point. I had been there 3 years. And, you know, I think it was easy to just be like, oh, hi, how are you? And, you know, I have 2 jobs. My husband has a, you know, a crazy job. We care for my, you know, for other people in our family. And so it's easy to be busy and not be connected. But after the election, you know, a few of us who are parents were standing on the block and our kids were playing and we just started talking and there was just this overwhelming feeling of grief and sadness and fear. And so some of my neighbors were like, what can we do? You know, we started asking these questions of ourselves. Like, we all have so many needs that are not being met. And what if we can be what we need, right? Like, what if we can do our best to provide for the other people who live here and also accept support from those people when we need it, right? Being vulnerable. And so when we have a need, reaching out and instead of suffering in silence, reaching out and say, hey, I need help with childcare, or hey, my car is broken, can someone give me a ride? Or hey, like, can someone Venmo me $15? You know, like being vulnerable. It takes that, we were talking about trust. And I really think trust is rooted in vulnerability. Showing up for each other, but also being open about what you're experiencing as well. And so we decided that a way to build community with our block is to have a block party. That was how we started. And we decided we wanted to do this because it would force us to knock on the door of every single house on our block, because we have to get signatures for the city to get a permit. And that we would have to talk to our neighbors in person about what our goal was and why we wanted to do this, and that hopefully we would get some buy-in. And we did. We got all the signatures we needed, which was, I think, over 80% of the folks on the block. And we had 75% of the people show up that day. We had a potluck that we organized, and we learned so much history about our block from this experience. There were people who lived in their childhood homes, who had been on the block for generations. People told me all sorts of stories about my home and the people who had lived there and how my home had changed. And they also told us that this is the first convening of the block that had ever existed in their memories. And that was shocking to me, because if you know Philadelphia, Philadelphia is a city of block parties and convenings. But my block had never done that before. And so it was a really incredible success. We had I have some pictures of things we've been doing, but down here we had a drum circle, which one of my neighbors loves drumming, so she brought out all her drums, and then all of a sudden all of our other neighbors are bringing instruments out, and we had this impromptu jam session on the block, which was really incredible. And all the kids got to meet each other and play, and they had like a parade, and it was really heartwarming. And I think it would have been easy for us to just say, cool, we did this, how fun, we can, you know, go back to our individual lives. But we did not do that. We decided, so this was a year ago, we're having our next block party on the May 2nd. And it was the same weekend last year. We decided that we were going to do more. And so we started a group text, and really how it started was among parents over the summer, when half of us couldn't afford camp and we still had to work. So we had a lot of childcare swaps. We would text, hey, I have a meeting today from this time to this time. Can kids hang out in the yard? And then another parent who wasn't on a meeting would watch the kids. And that has continued, this kind of swapping childcare to help support working parents when we can't afford thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of childcare. And also, childcare shuts down in the summer sometimes. How convenient. So that's how that started. And it has really grown. So I'm just going to share some more of the activities we've done to give you guys ideas about what you could be doing. So we have monthly mom coffee dates, where we go to coffee early in the morning on a Saturday, and we have other folks, you know, hang out with the kids so that moms can get support and talk about the things they're going through, and just kind of, it's like peer support group. Just organic peer support group. We have been inviting each other to our family activities, so birthday parties and gatherings, celebrations, anniversaries, making sure that our block people are our friends, and they are coming and celebrating with us and having those shared experiences. And in the winter, we did a lot of stuff. So we did organized caroling on our block, and we practiced together. The kids were loved it so much. We had neighbors come out that we had never met before we went to the next block. We had neighbors come out and stop us and talk to us and say that they can't wait to get involved next year. We had a winter solstice party. This is my favorite one. We had a winter solstice party where we had a soup potluck and everyone brought soup, and then we made lanterns, and then we wrote the things that we wanted to release for the year and the intentions we wanted to set for the next year. And we had a bonfire, and we put all of our intentions and things into the fire, and then we did call and response singing. And I'll say, a lot of the people on my block, this was not their vibe coming into this. This was, I don't think call and response singing was something they had experienced before. And then we went on a candlelit lantern parade throughout the neighborhood singing songs together. And afterwards, people were like, I've never done anything like that before, but it was great. And it was great. And people are like, what can we do for winter solstice next year? And for me, as someone who's a therapist, someone who also has struggled with mental health in my family, the winter time can be so hard. So having these intentional neighborhood traditions that we're like, we are committed to doing this every year now, gives us something to look forward to, gives us opportunity for reflection and connection and joy, which I think is the most important thing that we can build into our lives right now. So we had winter solstice party, which was really incredible. We had New Year's Eve fire and drum circle, see there? And I didn't put the picture on it, but some of my neighbors are very spiritual, and there's a picture of some of the kids with drums, and there's this little green flicker of light in all the pictures, and so my neighbors think that that is the spirit of our community that is represented in all of these activities we're doing. So we've done all of this awesome stuff, and now we're doing more stuff, which is really amazing. We did an ICE training because we have some undocumented folks on our block that we want to make sure that we're protecting. So one of my neighbors went and did a formal ICE training, and she came into the block and she did one for us. And we talked about how we each can show up in an activity like that and manage our own individual risks and who can take on what roles. Because myself as a parent, do I want to punch an ICE agent in the face? Yes. Am I going to do that? Maybe not, because I have 2 little kids, right? But is there someone on my block that could show up and get in someone's face and take on more of a physical role? Yes. And they're like, I will take that on. I'll blow the whistle, right? I'll send the signal chat, right? So we have a network now for our neighbors of really talking about what we can do and how we can show up and what we can give, right? What can I give to my community? What can I receive? And we also now have started a garden club where we're swapping seeds. We're helping do landscaping for some of our older neighbors who aren't physically able to do that anymore. And we, are continuing to create these traditions together. And we're also, it's growing. It's becoming much more broad outside of our block. My neighbors are becoming much more involved in the blocks surrounding. I live in Roxborough, in the community at large. We have folks who are doing free classes at the library that they're teaching our other neighbors about mindfulness and about gardening and about, we have a chess club now. Our library is really the best. And about how to care for your home. My one neighbor is now doing free yoga classes at the park at the end of our block for our broader neighborhood. They are doing landscaping at the park and cleanups at the park. We organized love letters to the library with the children because all of our children go there, and so we wanted to show support and advocacy and really instill that in our children. So the children did love letters to the library. We also are engaging in advocacy together. So I'm a lobbyist for March of Dimes. Advocacy is a huge part of my work. I know how complicated and intimidating it can be, but a lot of my neighbors did advocacy. The park that we all utilize had a really terrible broken sidewalk that existed for decades, and it made it really hard for people pushing strollers to access the park. And also, it's right beside a major street, so if someone tripped on the sidewalk, it could be, a big risk. So they advocated to our representatives and got the sidewalk fixed for the first time in decades. And a lot of our neighbors are now doing broader ICE protesting and activation in the city. And it has become really important. And it's really important because these activities were thought up and developed by our community members based on the needs of the community. They're not prescribed to us, or it's not that folks coming in telling us what we need. It's us saying, what do we need, and creating space for other people to say what they need, and pulling together resources. It's not about, how do I generate revenue off of this? How can I do this thing and get, make money off of it? No, it's about giving to each other. We've created a food pantry in the library. We've created a kind of wellness hub in the library because we have a lot of folks with housing instability and folks who are unhoused where they can go and get socks and soap and shampoo and toothbrushes and other basic health needs, or anyone can get those things. And I think mutual aid is one of the key parts of our overall resistance, right? Giving to each other what we need. We have some community fridges that we've revitalized from COVID times where folks are making meals and putting them in those fridges every single week. So really about meeting the needs of those communities. And I also want to highlight again, I'm talking about geographical community. And we have folks on our block who have, varying values and voted for different people. And so there's lots of folks with lots of differences, but we all have so many shared experiences, right? We both experience the broken sidewalk. We both experience SEPTA not working and not being able to get to work on the bus. We both experience grocery stores shutting down. We all experience the beauty of our parks and the beauty of our neighborhood and this wonderful library. And so that's an excellent place to start. I think a lot of folks are intimidated. How do I bridge the gap with people who might not have the same views as me? Well, it's but we both live right here and we both experience so much. And that is an excellent starting point for building those relationships. Oh, did you get on the bus? Did you make it on the bus the other day? Wasn't it bad? Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, we have now started building a relationship over something shared in common. So I want to offer some things that I've thought about when thinking about therapy and thinking about clinical work also, because this is something that comes up in therapy all the time with my folks. And also thinking about encouraging building of support networks. We talked about how social isolation can increase the risk of chronic health conditions and increase the risk of mental health conditions. And so the benefit of building social connections is that it helps folks live a healthier lifestyle. It helps folks find joy. It helps folks have stability and support, which I think is so critical. Outside of therapy, I used to work in community mental health. And one of the biggest things that folks told me is, you're the 6th therapist I've told my story to this year. It's not, we know that this work is often not sustainable. Folks leave that field, they go to private practice, they go elsewhere where they can make a living wage. But for the folks on the receiving end, there's not stability in the kind of support that they can receive. And so they have to rebuild those relationships over and over and over again. But if we can encourage folks to think into their community and think about the folks around them and what is available to them, then they can build more sustainable support networks around themselves. They know that somebody 3 doors down is always going to be there to talk to them if they have a problem, or their next door neighbor is around if they need someone to watch their kid real quick, or X, Y, and Z. We need that stability and support so that folks are not always on alert wondering where they're going to receive it. So some of the other things that I talk about with my therapy clients is thinking about the different things that are available, right? So number one, therapy certainly has a role. I do telehealth primarily, mainly for my own convenience, because I do it at night and while my kids are asleep. And a lot of parents, that is, it's good for them also, and it provides accessibility. In-person stuff is really important too, right? So therapy is great. I think in therapy and in clinical work, I can help folks build the skills so that they can be ready to build their support network. So many folks have social anxiety and fear and don't know where to start. They don't know where to start and how to think about building community. And that's something we can work on in therapy, clinically, right? Like, I can't take them to their library, but I can say, hey, have you thought about your library? Have you thought about thinking about the community center? Have you thought about a Facebook moms group? We have 3,000 people in our Facebook moms group for our neighborhood. And that is a starting point for a lot of moms in our neighborhood that translates into in-person walks, right? So, community-based exercise and physical activity, walking groups, running groups, mom stroller chats. Those kinds of things are ways for people to build support around themselves where they may not have it in their homes or in their families. Things like we have neighborhood like texting, and we have a signal chat now, which is primarily for emergencies, but it's a way for our neighbors to reach out if they need something also. And that has been increasing in that chat. Like, I need help with this. Can someone help me move this thing? I need help figuring out who I can call to do this thing. And so just building that connection, it's there. It's there. I know I can reach out and someone will respond to me. Support groups, peer groups, mental health first aid. That's something we've talked about on my block is having a mental health first aid for our whole block so that we have awareness about how to support our neighbors in a better way. And I'm going to go back to this built environment because finding ways to advocate for your physical spaces is so important. We've talked a lot about, how do we decrease mental health, but we need the foundational support. We need the opportunity to experience joy. We need the opportunity to experience connectedness. And the way to do that is through shared physical spaces. So we have to advocate for funding for social infrastructure and for services like public transportation and healthcare so that folks are getting what they need so that then they can show up as their authentic, most well selves. And so I just want to say that I think it is in this time where there's so much collective trauma and grief and terribleness. And when you zoom out, it can feel so overwhelming. Like, being able to create the support network that you need and that your neighbors need together is resistance. It is finding that joy that is going to carry us through these terrible times, which have carried people through terrible times historically. And it's one of the most powerful things that we can do. So I hope that, any of this was tangible and helpful for you all, but it certainly has improved my mental health and the health of my family. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Melissa. I will say joy is resistance. Mary Garrett, actually, who had to take a break, taught me that. So I appreciate that. Do people have questions? Oh, yeah, Mark. For our friends online.
Perfect, Arlene. Thanks for a wonderful presentation. I was wondering, how big of a group of people are involved? And because I think so often initiatives like this sort of stand or fall with the involvement of sort of a dedicated group of volunteers.
Yeah.
And when those fall away for whatever reason, the project kind of comes to a grinding halt. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that, on sort of how to keep it going. And
yeah, I think, so it started with 4 of us, and it has grown. I don't know how many people are on my block. I should know this. But there are a lot for Philadelphia. And what it has transformed into is that, there are now groups of, there's like we all convene a lot. Like, I would say 75% of the block, we get together a lot. So it's a large number of people that are convening in backyards or really just in the street. And we have a one-way street, so it's helpful, like with traffic and stuff, that we can kind of navigate that a little bit better. But now we have folks who are taking on leadership of the different components of the work we're doing, right? So we have a core of families that are kind of navigating the childcare stuff. We have a couple of people who are kind of supporting our older neighbors. We have a couple of neighbors who are involved in the more advocacy kind of side of things, and the ICE trainings and those kinds of things, and protection. And we all convene monthly. Like all of the kind of dedicated neighbors, we convene monthly to kind of talk about what's going on in the block and ideas for the future. And there's probably 25 or 30 of us who convene monthly. And we have like what we call a First Friday where we get together. And I think what keeps it going is that if it was just a meeting where we were like, oh, well, Susie fell and hurt herself and we need help, or, you know, housing prices have gone up, or taxes have gone up, how do we manage that? That's like depressing. So we make it fun. Like we have, you know, mocktails, and we have a potluck, and the kids are playing and running around and painting the sidewalk, and like it is a joyful experience for all of us. So we have an opportunity to talk about what's really happening, and get support while also having fun and building relationships. And so I think without the joy, it would probably fade away. And that's what happens with a lot of these mutual aid programs that come and go, right? Is that you are focusing on an issue that's devastating. People's lives are devastated. When that issue seems to be tweaked enough, like, okay, now I can take a step back and fall back into my life. But because we are trying to do both, we're trying to hold space for the devastation and the joy, like I think that creates more opportunity and more connectedness. These folks are my friends now. I don't think I would have said that a year ago, you know? So I think the joy is the part. Yeah.
I just want to thank you for everything that you do. I shared with Patty, Melissa, sorry, before she presented that I am a survivor of a severe perinatal postpartum, and I had perinatal mental health issues. And I really think the importance of building community helps with fighting stigma as well. Feeling that you can reach out and that they see you first as the person, and then your mental health issues come second, or they're part of you. So thank you.
Absolutely. And I also just want to say that we don't have great resources for in-person care for mothers and birthing folks when it comes to mental health. A lot of the community mental health spaces in Philadelphia do not allow you to bring your children with you. And if you can't afford childcare, right, which is more than your rent, you can't access mental health services. And so the statistic around at least 75% of folks who have a perinatal mental health issue go untreated. That's part of the reason why. Because you can't take your kids. There's not inpatient places for mothers and babies. So people are like, where am I going to leave my baby if I am having acute mental health symptoms? So building community helps people also access support and care.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It's just lovely, and it's a terrible word in the way it sounds, but the kind of glocal approach that you've taken, the global local, I think is really it's a really important way to kind of be able to zoom in and out. I did have one question, you know, and obviously this is built around maternity and infant health and mental health. But I wondered, how are the men doing in terms of participating in the community, and where are they showing up, and in what ways are they helpful or not? And you know, just is this, as it often is, a woman-driven enterprise, or we figured out how to actually share the load?
That's a great question. And it certainly started as a woman-centered, like, organizing and planning. But it has opened up a lot. And I think that the men on our block are equally participating in all of these activities at this point. No, I'm not. And so, I mean, it definitely started as moms, because I think we were fed up. We're like, I'm exhausted. You know, we're all, you know, working and trying to manage childcare and also make space for ourselves, which is critically important. And we can't do that without support. And our, you know, partners and fathers and whoever are also working. And, you know, we all need space to care for ourselves. And capitalism doesn't really allow us to do that. So we are, everyone is leaning on each other much more, and it is much more representative of everyone at this point. It has grown a lot.
This is an example of solidarity care.
Yeah, yes, I believe so.
More questions?
Hi, I'm Wes Sowers, and it was really great to hear your enthusiasm about building this. One question, though, that I have is whether the neighborhood is politically diverse and how that plays out.
Yes, yes, politically diverse. And I think to the initiation of this was kind of one-sided, because it was a lot of us, kind of depressed about the election and where we saw our country headed. But we were really intentional that we didn't want to make that the focus of our efforts, because we didn't want to exclude anyone. Like, we all, again, have all of these shared experiences. We all have such similar challenges. We want to show up for everyone. And in that, we also hope that that will build more connection and understanding. So I don't think we tolerate any sort of, of racism or any of those kinds of things. And if those things if they show up, there's only been one instance where there was an immigration-related dispute, and we were very clear that that was not a part of the values that we were hoping to share. But it hasn't happened since, and people show up. People of all political affiliations showed up to our events. Yeah.
All right, well, I want to thank Melissa again so much for sharing her experience. And her block party's in May, if you want to go. My block party is in October, if you want to come to my neighborhood. So thank you again, Melissa, Patty.
Panelists coming in online and some wonderful folks in person. So this is our panel discussion and presentation on consumer and family action in times of change. I'm Katie Morton. I'm our Director of Advocacy at the Family Training and Advocacy Center, and I'm going to introduce all of my NAMI friends here. I have the privilege of being able to work with NAMI a lot in my day job, and so many of these folks are my very close friends as well as my colleagues. So I'm going to start with Autumn Boxenschutz. Did I say it right? Yay! Okay. Who is the PAWS Director at NAMI York Adams. Autumn is a public health professional with a background in substance use prevention, mental health education, and community outreach. She has worked across school and community settings to deliver evidence-based programming and expand access to harm reduction and health resources. In her previous roles as a coalition coordinator and prevention specialist, Autumn led the development of the Change Coalition in Niagara Falls, New York, bringing together community partners to improve access to support for individuals affected by substance use and mental health challenges. She has a substantial experience working with youth, facilitating programs that focus on prevention, resilience, and emotional well-being. In her current role as the PAWS Program Director with NAMI York Adams, Autumn leads a school-based mental wellness program for youth, creating safe and supportive spaces for students to build coping skills, engage in peer discussion, and strengthen self-awareness. Her work centers on increasing access to mental health support while fostering inclusive and stigma-free environments. And we have Nikki. These are our folks that are in person. So Autumn and Nikki are here in person. So Nikki Wigand is the Director of Advocacy and Public Policy at NAMI Keystone, PA. She is, that was the first part of her bio, okay. She holds her master's degree in social work with a focus on community organizing and social action. Prior to her involvement with NAMI, Nikki worked in unhoused veteran services doing case management and outreach. She currently serves on a variety of statewide coalitions, working to improve the lives of those affected by mental illness, to include the Mental Health Planning Council, 988 Advocacy Coalition, and the Behavioral Health Advocacy Stakeholder Coalition, amongst others. Additionally, she serves as a NAMI Smarts and NAMI Connections facilitator, in our own voice presenter, and state trainer for NAMI Homefront. And now that I got myself all messed up here, and now I'm going to introduce our friends that are online with us here. So we have Kyle Carter, who is the Chief Executive Officer of NAMI Philly. Kyle comes to NAMI Philadelphia from the Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services, DBHIDS, many of you probably heard of, and with close to 2 decades of service across community organizations throughout Philadelphia. He has held leadership positions at 50 Shades of Purple Against Bullying and the Boys and Girls Club of Philadelphia, as well as having extensive experience at behavioral health organizations in the region. He holds a Master of Education, with the completion of his Doctor of Education upcoming this year, so yay. He is also he's also certified as a licensed behavior specialist in Pennsylvania. Rooted in Philadelphia, Kyle grew up in North Philly and attended college at Temple University, receiving his bachelor's in business law, and Eastern University, receiving his master's in special education. He has dedicated his career to serving those in his community and looks to continue to drive the mission to help individuals and families whose lives have been affected by mental illness. And then last but not least, we have Lexi Taylor, who is the Youth and Advocacy Manager at NAMI Philly. Lexi is originally from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and holds both a BA and MS in sociology from Oklahoma State University. She leads youth, young adult, and advocacy initiatives, including NAMI on Campus, Young Professional Leaders, Trauma to Triumph Mentorship Program, and the Philadelphia Behavioral Health Advocacy Task Force, which she co-founded with me. She currently advises 8 NAMI on Campus clubs and works to build community-driven, trauma-informed approaches to mental health advocacy. With lived experience and a focus on equity, Lexi has presented locally and nationally on youth engagement, community building, and behavioral health systems change. So those are our wonderful, wonderful panelists. So I'm going to pass it over to Nikki and Autumn to get us started. So Nikki, I believe you're talking a little bit about who NAMI is and the grassroots.
I am, correct. I was hoping to be loud enough and not have to pick up the microphone, but that's not going to work out. So my name, as Katie mentioned, is Nikki Wygand. I am the Director of Advocacy and Public Policy at NAMI Keystone. So for those of you not familiar with NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness, we are a national organization based out of Arlington, Virginia, with every state, with the exception of one of the Dakotas, I believe, that has a state organization. From there, the state organization provides technical assistance to all of its affiliates. So again, NAMI Keystone is a state organization for Pennsylvania, and we currently oversee 20 affiliates across the state of Pennsylvania. A lot of them represent single counties. We have a lot of affiliates that are county joiners. Autumn is joining us from York Adams. We just started one for Cumberland, Montour, or Cumberland, Monroe, and Pike counties. I think I got that right, CMP. Yeah, and then we just started another one in Susquehanna Valley that covers 5 different counties. So we're out there. I'll say too, though, and Chris, please don't be upset with me. Our wonderful CEO escorted me today. If there's not a NAMI in your community and you're interested, please feel free to reach out. My contact information is up there. Chris is chuckling now. So a little bit about NAMI. So we are the nation's largest grassroots advocacy organization dedicated to improving the lives of individuals that live with mental health conditions, as well as the lives of their family members, because I know in particular, being somebody with my own lived experience and as well as it running through my family, we can't do this on our own. We can't recover on our own. We need those supports. And although sometimes family does get in the way, family does play a critical role in the recovery of individuals living with a mental health condition. So we do that through support, education, and advocacy. Support, we have a helpline. All NAMIs do. You can call in during normal business hours. Some of them run after hours as well. Father Paul mentioned, well, what happens after 5 o'clock? So yeah, you can call in, you can ask questions, all those types of things. We can connect you to resources. We have resources available on our own merit. And this is for NAMI Keystone. I'll let Autumn talk about what's going on at their NAMI, and Lexi and Kyle talk about what's happening in NAMI Philly. But so support education. We do lots of education programs. We have a whole list of NAMI signature programs. I know in my bio, we talked about NAMI Smarts for Advocacy. That's our advocacy training program that we do, teaching folks how to turn their lived experience into a legislative ask. And that's been handy and abundant, and we're actually doing one this evening in preparation for Advocacy Day on May 4th. So a little bit about that community organizing here more in a second. And we do lots of support groups. We have I mentioned signature programs with peer-to-peer. That is all about peers and people with lived experience and, how they navigate the world and shared tips, etc. We have one family to family, the same thing. We're talking about signs and symptoms, crisis planning, communication techniques. NAMI Homefront is that for veteran families. And then we do community presentations. In Our Own Voice is one where those of us with, if I could backpedal real quick, everybody at NAMI either is living with a mental health condition themselves or is a family member supporting. So that's very important. In Our Own Voice is those of us with lived experience. We go out and we share that lived experience with people. What led us to get a diagnosis of a mental health condition, how that manifested within ourselves, what did treatment look like, what are we doing now, because it's all about recovery and hope in recovery, and that things can change and you will get better, and just provide that hope. So I'm very happy and proud to be an Our Own Voice presenter. I am a veteran myself, so I talk a lot about my experience in the Army and how that shaped my mental health and what I'm doing now. So I'm always excited to do one of those presentations. So a little bit about our grassroots. You know, we talked about, you know, nation's largest grassroots advocacy organization. Grassroots for NAMI looks like we're a membership-based organization, currently dues paying, hopefully moving away from that model sooner rather than later. And those are our members. That's our grassroots membership. I mentioned I'm the director of advocacy. I use a forum called, or a platform called Quorum. I do my action alerts through that. I mobilize my advocates. I'm like, hey, y'all, this issue is happening right now. And my name tag stuck to my hair. How awkward. Oh, God. Okay. Okay. Of all the things to happen on a Monday, that's it. So I forgot what I was talking about. A quorum, yes. So, hey, y'all, this issue's happening. We need your support. Reach out to your representative, senator, ask them to support or not to support this specific issue. Tell them why that means something to you. A lot of our folks do go through NAMI Smarts for Advocacy. So NAMI Smarts, again, is and letting people know how to turn their lived experience into a legislative ask. So that's one of the ways that we use grassroots organizing. We also use grassroots organizing and just bringing volunteers in, recruiting people to become connections facilitators. Connections is our peer-to-peer support groups, to be family support group facilitators. That's how we use grassroots organizing to accomplish the NAMI mission. So, what's my next question? Oh, how do we connect with communities? As I mentioned, we're everywhere. 49 states. In Pennsylvania alone, we have the 20 affiliates. We have more affiliates coming online. Always looking for the opportunity to have new affiliates join the NAMI Keystone PA team. And just equipping those affiliates, a big role that we have at NAMI Keystone is providing technical assistance to those affiliates, whether that be with training, giving them ideas, having them ask us questions. Well, what do you see it this way? But again, like everybody else has talked about, we're the experts in our own communities. So we also mutually rely on them for their expertise, because NAMI Keystone is located in Pittsburgh. I don't know what's happening in Philadelphia. I could see it on the news, but that's not necessarily the best picture, clearest picture of what's actually happening either. I was in charge of developing a program, crisis intervention training for youth. Currently the model is for adults, and now we're looking at a youth one for school resource officers, CYF employees, juvenile probation individuals, that they can help and effectively help a youth in a mental health crisis. So while I'm doing that, I'm relying heavily on my county partners to, coordinate who's presenting at the resource fair, getting resources in hand, paper copies, so people can take that information home with them. And I can't do that on my own. If I were to try to organize this training in Dauphin County alone, I would be lost, because I don't know what exists in Dauphin County. So it's all about that mutual relationship too, as well, between the state organization and the local affiliates.
All right, now we're going to hear from Kyle and Autumn about how NAMI creates its own community through programs and initiatives. So, Autumn, are you kicking us off? All right, Autumn's going to kick us off, I think.
Okay, so I'll start with NAMI York Adams. I can't really speak about what's happening in Philly or anywhere else, but Nikki already mentioned a lot of like the signature programs, the peer-led support groups, and yes, we're doing those in NAMI too. We do a big connections group with the UPMC hospital, and that started when there was a shooting previous at UPMC hospital, and there was a big need. So we kind of follow the need of the community. Everything we do is through that community. Same thing, I'm the Pause program, which is a non-signature program, and that started with a need for the youth. There's always a need for the youth, but it was huge. Like, we kept getting contacts through parents that were in our signature program. So we developed the program Pause, and we run it in the schools with volunteers. So that is a volunteer-led program. We train the facilitators. They don't just go in and talk. We train them, but they're volunteers. We have community education presentations, kind of similar to what Nikki said. We do a lot of In Our Own Voices presentations through the college, York College, and we also do it through CIT, like you mentioned. I'm kind of just piggybacking off of you right now, but so we do it In Our Own Voices presentation through CIT as well, and then we also do Hearing Distressing Voices, which, if anyone doesn't know what that is, it's a simulation through hearing voices, and it helps with CIT because when an officer is approaching someone, they don't really know what they're going through, and that kind of puts them in their shoes, so they can address them with how they need to be. And like Nikki said again, lived experience is at the center of everything we do. That peer connection is really important to us because we want people to be able to meet everyone where they're at, and that helps with the lived experience. It was mentioned with Melissa's presentation about social media, and like, yes, social media can be bad, but we created a social media presence that has kind of actually connected our community. So with certain parts of our community that we couldn't reach, we actually have reached them through TikTok, if anyone knows what that is, and also Instagram. And we've also made connections through different NAMI affiliates around the country. Like, we connected with one in California, which was really cool. So through the virtual community as well, we've kind of created a separate community outside of like in person, which I personally favor in person, but I do really enjoy that social media presence as well. We also like the consistency, because we run the groups consistently and reliably. Everyone doesn't show up reliably or consistent, but we're there when they need us. And that's what we kind of pride ourselves on, especially within the schools. We have facilitators that show up and no students show up, but the fact that they were there if a student wanted to show up was really important for us. And same thing with the signature programs. We also started a podcast, which is shining a light on different organizations within our community. So a lot of the guests are different behavioral organizations or nonprofits who offer resources that a lot of the community don't know about. So we kind of give them a 30-minute spotlight to just give us a rundown on what they're doing, and we spread that through the community. So that's York Adams as of right now.
All right, I'm passing it over to you, Kyle. All right, Kyle, try again, see if we can hear you. Lexi, you want to say something? See if we can hear you. No, we can't hear you either. All right, we're just checking. All right, can you guys try again? I'm sorry, we keep doing this to you.
Hello. Okay, I could talk all day if people let me. So, something very important that I forgot to mention that's newer to NAMI Keystone. We at the Keystone office have a Department of Equity Engagement now that's done a lot of fantastic work in the Black and Brown communities in and around Pittsburgh and across the state. One of our bigger projects that we're currently involved in is, I'm not going to remember what it stands for because somebody else came up with the acronym, but VIBE. So it's Black Youth Suicide Prevention. We got partnered with OMSAS and Dr. Adair when he was still there to begin this project, and we're currently working with Lincoln University, and we're going across the state and having listening sessions. So far, we've had 2 of them. To hear from the community, to see what's important to them, especially the youth, and how we can best support them, and how the adults in their lives can best support them, and particularly their teachers. I mentioned the CIT for Youth thing and how we developed that, and we there's been a lot of focus on youth and young adults because that's when mental health starts. It starts between typically the ages of like 14 and 24 is when we first start noticing symptoms. And even personally, that's when my own mental health struggle started when I was in high school. And having had to go from the time I was 16, kind of got a little bit of a diagnosis. Okay, here's take some medicine, but nothing really happened until I separated from the military at the age of 32, I think, is when I got out. I don't remember. It's all running together. But yeah, so I went from the age of 16 to 32 without any actual mental health treatment officially. So knowing that all of that is a thing, and then getting to children and individuals sooner rather than later, so that things aren't drug out. Okay.
We still can't hear you, Lexi. Sorry. All right. While they
keep talking until it pops up. So you can talk, but until you hear their voice.
okay. She's trying, testing. All right, so Autumn, one of the questions on here is about how people can get involved with NAMI, if you want to speak to that.
So a lot of our volunteers have gotten involved with us through registration forms on our exact website. We've also had people that come into our office, which has been a struggle because we changed office and Google Maps has not updated our address at all yet. So they've gone to the wrong office but then called us. So we've had people that would call in and we direct them to the registration forms through our website. And with PAWS specifically, we have a separate website, and we also have volunteers through schools that have registered through that. So we have social workers that work with us through PAWS as well. So they can get involved in any way they choose fit, like whether that's calling. I prefer emails. I don't like calling, so I'll prefer emails. A lot of people send us emails. A lot of people stop in if they know our exact address. But a lot of it's through registration forms through online. I also have the question about volunteer opportunities at NAMI. For York Adams specifically, we're fully ran based off volunteers. We have 5 actual staff members, which is not enough for everything we do. So like without the volunteers, we would not be doing everything we're able to do. So they facilitate or co-facilitate our support groups through UPMC connections. We also do a basics group, peer-to-peer. Those are volunteers that receive training through NAMI Keystone. We also have volunteers that make up our board and all of our committees. So our fundraising committee is all community members who have experience in fundraising, which I do not, so thankful for them. They helped plan our gala that happened just this past Saturday. They're also helping plan the Break the Stigma and the Give Local York fundraisers that we have coming up. Our program committee, which has helped me significantly with PAWS, those are community members, specifically some school board members and also teachers. They've helped me develop the program to kind of fit the schools better. I'm not a parent and I've never worked in a school, so that was significantly helpful for me because I tailored it to what they were saying. They help at all of our community events and outreach tables. So we have a huge presence within the community. We go to health fairs, we go to back to school nights at school. We go to community events like Fall Fest at the police station in October, and they run our table. So having a presence at all these local events help us really get our reach out there. And like I said, without them, we would not be able to go to all these different events because we just don't have the capacity with staff. They also kind of helped get our name out there in different environments. So we are now involved with the local library, which was helped by a librarian at the library who went to one of our groups. We didn't have that connection before, but her volunteering with us has actually spread out our group capacity. So we run a PAWS group through there now, community one. And also different community organizations, like we partnered with 6 for the month of May to run our mental health awareness Post-it note thing that we do. So we put a tree in the organization and people write on a Post-it note like a affirmation or their story or anything uplifting, and they put it on the tree. And we partnered with 6 new organizations this year to do that through our volunteers going out and spreading the word about NAMI. They also help with our CIT week, so we do it in our Own Voices presentation with our HDV, Hearing Distraction Voices presentation, and those are volunteers that come in and do that. And we have around 4 people trained in our Own Voices, and that kind of gives a diverse story told every time. So we really like volunteers coming in for that one. And I think that's all I have for NAMI York Adams.
Yeah, do folks in the audience have questions for our panelists? Not our online panelists, but our in-person panelists.
We could talk about NAMI all day. We love NAMI.
Well, first, thanks for a great panel. I wondered, at the risk of asking just very overtly political questions, what we are seeing happen federally is more or less unprecedented. Even, kind of colleagues of mine who were around for the Reagan years see this as exceeding everything in terms of destruction of federal training and technical assistance mechanisms, the erosion of funding, and then the repurposing of existing funding, at least ideologically, in the direction of reinstitutionalization and very non-person-centered interventions. Nationally, NAMI National has been actually fairly active. They've put out a number of statements explicitly responsive to various executive orders. I'm wondering what folks are doing or thinking about at the state level, and part of that being communicating to the people of Pennsylvania stuff that can be pretty impenetrable, like why does dismantling SAMHSA make any difference? We all know that. The average person on the street has no idea what role SAMHSA plays in setting kind of federal policy or best practices. So just curious if you could all, and I know there's, state level and, regional chapters, but what are people thinking, doing, or planning around explicit response to various federal actions?
So I'll start off by saying that a lot of what we do at NAMI Keystone, we take our directions directly from what National is doing. I don't, at the state level, send out a lot of action alerts involving that kind of stuff because National sends them to everybody. Everybody who has a NAMI membership should get national advocacy alerts. We participate in a lot of statewide coalitions. That's how I got involved in this group. With FTAC in particular, although I've been working with Katie for quite some time, our real involvement started with Medicaid and what's happening around that in organizing and how can we interrupt timelines, maybe go back on that. I personally, I put a lot of stake in voting. Just getting people registered to vote and educated voting and not just voting to check a box, because that's what happens. You know, you grow up in a certain environment and your parents are voting a certain way, so you continue that tradition and just vote. So providing an education on the issues and what's happening and how they impact people. You know, we talked about the helpline too, and letting people know like what kind of mail they need to be looking out for as far as Medicaid and SNAP goes, to make sure that they maintain those benefits.
I'm wondering, Katie, would you mind talking a little bit? Katie's not technically part of NAMI, but her and Lexi have developed the programming around advocacy education. It's something that within our office we had really thought about for a really long time. And it was something that Lexi and Kyle both had a lot of interest in. So I'll let Katie just talk a little bit about some of the local education efforts and community building they're doing around advocacy.
Put me on the spot. Yes, so my friend Lexi up there and I saw this need, as well as Kyle, saw this need in Philadelphia. Folks were contacting NAMI, looking for ways to talk to their legislators, how to do that, how to understand how policy works in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. And so Lexi and I put our heads together and we came up with an Advocacy 101 training that's very basic, but it covers a bunch of different topic areas, sort of how policy works. In Pennsylvania, it's very state focused, because I used to be a state staffer, so that's where I know information. But we have been expanding out into the Philadelphia sort of policy sphere as well. And we've done that presentation like lots of different places. I keep looking at Lexi like she's going to be able to say something, but she can't. So sorry, Lexi. But we usually present together, so this is weird. But yeah, we've done that presentation to different college campuses, different groups of providers, to our group, the Philadelphia Behavioral Health Advocacy Task Force, which is a huge mouthful. We call it PBAT. And we have that group that meets once a month virtually on Monday afternoons, and it's open to whoever wants to come. It's really a space for folks to come together and talk about what they're doing in the advocacy space, get information on how to do advocacy, find community with other folks that have similar interests. Because we always talk about going to talk to legislators is a little less nerve-wracking when you bring friends. So we've done a lot of work there, and in the last few months we've had folks from People's Budget come and talk about the Philadelphia budget. We've had Melissa come and speak as well. So it's really just a space where we've brought a lot of folks together, and you know, we've created this community, and people have really responded well to it. So,
and before I get to Ken, May 4th is the Mental Health Advocacy Day at the Capitol, of which I know NAMI has been hugely involved in helping to shape that agenda. Katie's been there, a few others. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about what the legislation is that you're digging into, or some of the talking points that are going to be part of it? And everybody's invited, by the way. So it's May 4th at the Capitol. It's it's a big group of people, so you'll be able to find everybody easily. I believe it starts at 10 a.m. that morning, but would you guys mind just talking about that very quickly?
Yes, I'm going to tag team this with my fellow planning person, Nikki. So yes, it's May 4th at the Capitol. It's been a huge undertaking and effort. It's growing, which is amazing. There's like tons of folks signed up. Everybody is welcome. Please come. But what our ask is that we're focusing on this year is, you have to say it, Nikki. I'm going to forget it.
Every dime on time, meaning pass the budget fully. and on time, so that we don't run into what we ran into last year. I know you're shaking your head. I feel the same way. But like last year, this isn't just last year, but using last year as an example, there are some critical funds that were in the mental health budget that were cut, and I'm talking 988 funding. So 988, for those of you who don't know, is the new suicide prevention lifeline number, but with the intention of it being in like immediate crisis response. So someone to call, someone to respond, somewhere to go. So we can't even fund the somewhere to call in Pennsylvania because there's no money to do so. That money again was cut from the budget last year. In talking about what's happening federally, county-based funding is a huge offset of the federal dollars that we're going to lose. So county-based funding works with those who are underinsured or uninsured, also covers services that aren't covered by Medicaid. So that increase in county-based funding was also taken away from the past budget last year. Additionally, it keeps going. The money that helps, the CHIPS money that helps individuals transition from the state hospital system back into the community was also cut. And that was the first time in years that has happened. So all in all, best guess is somewhere between $50 and $60 million did not make it from the governor's proposed budget to what was finally passed very incredibly late. So that's our big ask this year, is fund the budget every dime on time.
Okay, wait, can our friends online test again? Sorry. We can't hear you, Lexi, but I'm glad you can hear us. All right.
Keep going and have a few. Go ahead.
So I was going to say too, so yes, and in addition to that, there's been several groups that have brought out resources around additional money. Like Nikki was talking about, it's not actually additional money, it's money that just was never put into the budget that was supposed to be in there. So we're going to have some leave behinds with that information too, but it's asking for an additional 40 million, which is actually just money we didn't get, so.
Yes, money that was cut last year and money that was not included in the proposed budget for this year. And we've also been working with a communications firm in and around Harrisburg that step therapy for physical health was finally done away with 3 years ago, I believe. And now there is a piece of legislation that would do away with step therapy in the mental health space, House Bill 1519. And that'll be, it's not our main talking point, but it's definitely on the table because, as we know, step therapy is definitely more harmful than good. I mean, even at the VA, and that's a federal thing, I've had to go through step therapy. I get a new doctor. They think that this medication is going to work better than this one has and has been working. So that's a challenge. And you know, we had a pre-conference dinner last night, and you know, we talked about gene therapy. Like, genetic testing is huge, and that would go so far as a step therapy not being a thing anymore. But of course, you know, the law has to change so that we move away from that model. So that's another thing we're to be advocating for on Advocacy Day. Yes, we have 2 NAMI Smarts days prepping for Advocacy Day. So NAMI Smarts has an Advocacy Day module, again, sharing your story. And then, you know, Katie just talked about safety in numbers, making it less intimidating where you're going in to talk to a legislator. So that's also part of the training. So we have one of those happening from 6 to 8 this evening. Lexi's email was on that slideshow initially. So you can reach out to her about attending that. And we're also doing, so that's from 6 to 8 this evening. And then Thursday, we're doing the same block of instruction from 10 to 12.
Thanks, guys. All right. I think, did you have one more, Katie, that you wanted to? No, okay. We're going to go to Mary Garrett, and then we're going to come back to Ken.
So if we can't make it on May 4th, what resources can we get hold of to push for every dime on time and restoration of funding?
That's a very good question, and thank you for asking that because I haven't thought of it yet. Typically, in the past years when we do this, this is our 5th advocacy day, I think. So I started my job in March of 2018. So while I was in the process of figuring out what I was doing, COVID happened. So having just now started organizing over the last couple years, it's grown exponentially. And what I've done in the past is I mentioned Quorum, our action alert software. I've set up a QR code or a link that people can click into, and a letter you can sign up to send a letter directly to your I just haven't started that process yet for this year, but feel free to check the NAMI Keystone Facebook page. So all that stuff will get published on there leading up to the days of. And we also have a distribution list in email. I'm not going to remember it because we set it up just for this March, but I'll make sure I get with you before the end of the day to give that to you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So I had a specific question I was going to ask, but I just have to respond to the challenge that the step care issue raises, because that's a particular approach that they want to get rid of, they being the pharmaceutical industry, because it will make them a lot more money. And that's an issue that is a potential problem. And I only raise it as a potential problem because when more money gets spent on pharmaceuticals, which is what they're hoping will happen, because they'll get meds who are on patent and they can jam it up as high as they can, then we have less money for everything else. And we have a system now that's set up that's kind of a win, it's a zero-sum game. You take more money from this and you lose money in this area, which you've just described really well in terms of the losses that we all sustained with the last budget. And it's very distressing to be in a time when all you're trying to do is to tread water at best. And actually what's happened is that you've sunk down a little bit further. So now you're barely able to breathe. So what I'm about to say, I think I recognize that every dime on time wouldn't it be nice if government functioned? If government just did what it's supposed to do, wouldn't that be nice? And is it too much to ask for government to function and do its job? But I also got to say that it's really distressing when even if government was functioning, it still wouldn't be doing its job well, because we don't have the resources that we need in order to help people stay healthy and well, and the inequities in that are profound, right? So I guess part of what I wanted to try to take this was to get a sense, if we can hold the line where we are, what are we actually aspiring to? What are we, to pick up on the comments that have been made earlier by Melissa and Father Paul, where what are we looking to make happen that is a demand, that isn't just you guys do your job, but actually let's build this commonwealth to be a place where people flourish. So what is there a notion of particular issues or concerns that are at the top of the agenda about the changes we want to see that are actually move our efforts forward? Is there some place that we want to go to, not just stay where we are or try to stay where we are? Do we have a vision? Are we developing a vision? Is there a sense of where and how we might move forward?
That's a huge question, Ken. I would say I think what we focus a lot on a lot of our collective work is preventative, not reactive services. Oh, okay. Lucy's here. Does this mean that our friends online can talk now? Lexi, hey! We can hear you! Woohoo! Yes! Yes. Thanks, Lexi. Kyle, do you have any comments or things you'd like to add in? Can you guys hear me? We can.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Or one question. So how many of you are NAMI members? Oh, it's not enough. You need more. So your homework is to go home to your county and see who your local NAMI is and to see how you might be able to sign up. The dues are not very much. I have to say, it's the most reasonable dues in town. And see how you might be able to connect with the local NAMI in your neighborhood, because this is not just a resource for the clients you're working with, the patients you're working with, but it's a resource for you too. So you too can go and volunteer, or you too can go to a support group if that's what you need in your own community. So don't forget that NAMI's there for professionals as well as for the people that you're treating. So just keep that in mind. So any other questions about NAMI? We're going to be sending you guys some information. Thank you so much to our presenters. Thank you for everything you do. NAMI's been an excellent partner to the PPLC and FTAC, and I really appreciate all of your work. Thank you for presenting, and thanks, Katie, for moderating. All right. We have lunch, which I believe is ready to go in the back. So we're going to take a bit of a break, and we will be coming together. We'll have about an hour, but we're going to do a bit of an announcement around some family inclusion things about 15 minutes before we get our presentations going this afternoon. Thanks.